You'll never leave me. Olivia said it loud enough for the entire table to hear, her glass raised, her smile sharp and effortless, the kind of smile that turns a room into an audience. Laughter followed, soft at first, then louder, rolling across the polished wood and crystal like it belonged there. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just sat there, fingers wrapped around a glass of bourbon I hadn't touched, watching the woman I'd spent 12 years building a life with turn me into a punchline. The restaurant was one of those downtown places where the lighting is low and everything costs too much, the kind of place Olivia loved because it made her feel like she had arrived somewhere important. She always did like an audience. And tonight she had one. Her coworkers leaned in, smiling, waiting for me to say something, maybe defend myself, maybe play along. I didn't. I just met her eyes. There was something in them I hadn't seen before. Or maybe something I had ignored for too long. Confidence. Not the good kind. The kind that comes from thinking you've already won. Daniel's not going anywhere, she added, tilting her head slightly, almost affectionate, almost kind, if you didn't listen too closely. He wouldn't even know how. More laughter. Someone clinked a glass. I felt it then, not anger, not embarrassment, something colder, something quieter. The kind of clarity that only shows up when everything finally lines up in a way you can't unsee. I leaned back in my chair, slow, deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. Because suddenly I did. 12 years is a long time to mistake control for love. 12 years of shared accounts, shared routines, shared silence. Olivia handled everything that looked important from the outside. The social circle, the finances, the image. I handled what didn't get photographed. The long hours, the late nights, the quiet fixes that kept everything running. Somewhere along the way, those lines blurred until she started believing they didn't exist at all. That I didn't exist outside of what she allowed. I let the laughter fade on its own. No need to interrupt it. People eventually run out of breath. I set my glass down, untouched, and adjusted my sleeve. Small movement, but it grounded me. Across the table, Olivia was still smiling, still playing her role perfectly, the confident wife with the harmless, predictable husband. She thought she understood the story we were in. She thought she had written the ending. What she didn't know was that I had already read the last page. And I was done pretending I hadn't. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that does not come from peace but from something settling into place. Olivia sat beside me scrolling through her phone, laughing softly at messages I could not see, her reflection flickering against the window as the city lights passed in slow streaks. She did not ask if I was upset. She did not need to. In her mind, the night had gone exactly as expected. Control does not feel like control when you are the one holding it. It feels like certainty. That was her mistake. I pulled into the driveway of the house we bought 8 years ago, a place that looked perfect from the outside, trimmed hedges, warm porch lights, the kind of home people assume is stable without ever looking closer. Inside, everything was exactly where it should be. Clean. Organized. Carefully maintained. Olivia liked things that way. Predictable. Managed. Owned. She kicked off her heels by the door and walked straight to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine like the night had been nothing more than a casual dinner. "You were quiet tonight," she said without looking at me, her tone light, almost amused. I loosened my tie and set my keys down in the same spot I always did. "Just listening," I said. That was not a lie. I had been listening for a long time. To the small things. The changes in tone. The questions that were no longer questions but tests. The way her phone would turn face down whenever I walked into a room. The late meetings that stretched a little too long. The names that came up a little too often. None of it loud enough to accuse. Just enough to notice. She took a sip of wine and leaned against the counter, studying me now, measuring. "You know I was joking, right?" she said. I met her eyes for a second, then looked away, just enough to give her what she expected. "Of course," I answered. She smiled, satisfied, like a box had been checked. Conversation over. Control reaffirmed. What she did not see was that the moment she said those words tonight, something shifted for me in a way that could not be undone. I had stopped asking whether anything was wrong. I had started asking how long it had been wrong. And more importantly, what she was hiding. The next morning started like every other morning we had lived for years, which is exactly why it felt different. The alarm went off at 6:30, the coffee machine clicked on at 6:35, and Olivia moved through the kitchen like she always did, efficient, composed, already dressed for a day that looked important from the outside. I watched her from the doorway, leaning slightly against the frame, noticing details I had stopped paying attention to until recently. The way she checked her phone before she even took her first sip of coffee. The way her expression shifted for a split second when she read something, not guilt, not exactly, but something close to anticipation. She caught me looking and smiled. The easy practiced. What? She asked. I shook my head and stepped in, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. Nothing, I said. That word had become a habit. Nothing was easier than asking the right questions and getting the wrong answers. Nothing was how you stayed in a life that had already started to slip without admitting it. But that morning, nothing felt heavier than usual. She left at 7:15 sharp, heels clicking across the floor, keys in hand, a quick kiss on my cheek that felt more like routine than intention. Late meeting tonight, she said, already halfway out the door. I nodded like I always did. The door closed, and the house went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. I stood there for a moment, listening to it, like it might tell me something if I gave it enough time. Then I moved. Slow. Intentional. Not because I was trying to catch her. Because I was finally ready to see what had been in front of me the whole time. Her laptop sat on the dining table, closed, sleek, controlled, just like everything else she owned. She never forgot it. Not once in years. That alone was enough to make me pause. I pulled out a chair and sat down, my reflection staring back at me in the black screen before it lit up. For a second, I considered walking away. That version of me still existed, the one that preferred not knowing over knowing something that would change everything. But that version was already fading. I opened the laptop. The screen came to life instantly. No password. No hesitation. Just access. That was the first thing that did not make sense. Olivia did not forget things like that. Ever. My chest tightened, not from panic, but from recognition. People do not get careless without a reason. I moved through the desktop slowly, not searching for anything specific, just letting patterns reveal themselves. Emails were clean. Too clean. Messages organized in a way that felt curated, not natural. Then I saw it. A calendar entry, tucked between meetings and calls, something that did not belong. No client name. No company. Just a location. A hotel I recognized downtown. Recurring. Weekly. Same time she always said she was. Running late. I stared at it longer than I should have, like the meaning might change if I gave it enough time. It did not. The room felt smaller, not because anything had changed, but because everything had finally made sense. I did not slam the laptop shut. I did not react. I just sat there, letting the truth settle in the only way it could. Quiet. Precise. Final. Betrayal does not always arrive as a confession. Sometimes it shows up as a pattern you can no longer ignore. And in that moment, I understood something else just as clearly. Whatever Olivia thought she was hiding, she believed she had already won. And that belief was about to cost her everything. I did not close the laptop right away. I left it open, the screen glowing softly in the quiet house, like it was waiting for me to decide what kind of man I was going to be next. For years I had been the one who explained things away, who gave the benefit of the doubt, who chose comfort over confrontation. That version of me would have shut it down, poured another cup of coffee, and convinced himself there was a reasonable explanation. But clarity changes something fundamental. Once you see the pattern, you cannot pretend it is random. I reached for my phone and took a picture of the screen. Not out of anger. Out of precision. Evidence does not need emotion. It just needs to exist. Then I checked the rest. Not digging, not searching blindly, just following the same quiet logic that had led me here. A rideshare receipt in her email, same location, same time. A reservation confirmation under a name I did not recognize, but the date matched the calendar entry perfectly. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was organized. Planned. Repeated. That was the part that settled the heaviest. This was not a mistake. This was a system. I leaned back in the chair and let out a slow breath, the kind you take when something inside you locks into place. No anger. No panic. Just understanding. Olivia did not think she was risking anything. She thought she had control. Over the house. Over the money. Over me. That belief gave her confidence. It made her careless in ways she would never admit. I closed the laptop gently, exactly the way I found it, and stood up. The house looked the same as it had an hour ago. Clean. Stable. Untouched. But I knew better now. What looks perfect from the outside is often just well managed from within. And in that moment, I stopped thinking about what she had done. I started thinking about what I was going to do next. That afternoon, I did something I had not done in years. I stopped reacting and started planning. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but deliberately, the way you approach something that will decide the rest of your life. I drove across town to a place Olivia had never been, a quiet office building that looked forgettable on purpose. No glass walls, no branding, just a name on a door most people would walk past without noticing. Ethan Blake. I had saved his number months ago after a casual recommendation, one of those things you tell yourself you will never need. Turns out, you only need it once. He did not ask for a long story. He listened, steady, focused, the kind of attention that does not interrupt because it already understands the direction. Things are going. I showed him the calendar, the receipts, the patterns. He nodded once, then leaned back slightly like a man looking at a problem he knew how to solve. You are not here to confront her, he said. You are here to protect yourself. That sentence landed heavier than anything else I had heard all day. For years, I had measured everything in terms of us, what we built, what we shared, what we might fix. Sitting there, I realized something simple and uncomfortable. There was no us anymore. There was only what remained, and what could be taken if I did nothing. We talked numbers, accounts, ownership, things Olivia believed she controlled completely. Structures I had never questioned because I trusted the person standing next to me. Ethan did not rush. He outlined options, timelines, legal edges that most people only learn when it is already too late. Quiet strategies. Clean exits. Moves that did not look like moves until they were finished. When I walked out of that office, nothing around me had changed. Same streets, same traffic, same city moving forward like it always does. But inside, something had shifted completely. I was no longer trying to understand what Olivia was doing. I was preparing for what I was about to do. That evening, I came home at the same time I always did, pulled into the driveway the same way, walked through the front door with the same quiet routine Olivia expected. Nothing about me looked different. That was the point. She was already in the kitchen, phone in hand, a half-finished glass of wine sitting on the counter like a prop in a scene she had played too many times. Long day, she said without looking up. I nodded, setting my jacket over the chair. Same as usual, I replied. And for the first time, that was not entirely true. Dinner was quiet, but not tense. Just distant. Two people sitting across from each other, moving through habits that no longer meant anything. She talked about work, about people I had never met but was expected to recognize, about plans that did not include me even when they sounded like they should. I listened, the same way I had learned to listen for years, except now I was hearing something different. Gaps. Inconsistencies. The subtle shift in tone when she mentioned certain names. The careful way she avoided specifics without realizing she was doing it. After dinner, She stood up and checked her phone again, that same flicker of anticipation crossing her face before it disappeared behind something neutral. "I have to head out for a bit," she said, casual, already reaching for her keys. "Client thing. Might be late." I leaned back slightly, watching her, letting the moment stretch just enough to matter. "Of course," I said. No questions. No resistance. That was what she expected. That was what kept everything easy for her. She smiled, quick, satisfied, like a door had just been confirmed locked behind her. When she left, the house settled into silence again, but this time it felt different. Not empty. Focused. I walked into the study and sat down, pulling out the folder Ethan had told me to start. Copies. Notes. Timelines. Not messy. Not emotional. Clean. Every detail placed exactly where it needed to be. This was no longer about catching her. That part was already done. This was about control. Real control. The kind you do not announce. The kind you execute. I looked at the clock on the wall, counting minutes not because I was waiting for her, but because I knew exactly where she was. And for the first time in a long time, I did not feel uncertain. I felt prepared. Because while Olivia believed she was stepping out into something hidden, I was already several steps ahead, building something she would not see coming until it was already too late. The next few days moved with a strange kind of precision, like everything in my life had quietly shifted onto a different track without anyone else noticing. Olivia stayed the same on the surface, confident, composed, moving through her routines with that same unshaken certainty that nothing around her was changing. She still left at the same time, still returned with the same casual explanations, still carried herself like someone who believed the ground beneath her was solid. That belief made everything easier for me. I did not confront. I did not question. I observed. I documented. Every time she stepped out, every time her story did not quite match the timing, every small inconsistency became another piece of something larger, something structured. Ethan's voice stayed in the back of my mind the entire time, steady and clear. Do not rush. Do not react. Build. So I did. Bank accounts were adjusted quietly, not emptied, not obvious, just shifted enough to change control without triggering suspicion. Access points were reviewed, passwords updated, documents copied and stored where they could not be touched or altered. Ownership was not what it looked like on paper anymore. It was what could be proven when it mattered. One night, she came home later than usual, the clock reading past 11, her energy slightly off, like she had forgotten to reset before walking through the door. "Long night," she said, dropping her bag and slipping off her heels. I looked up from the couch, calm, steady. "I figured," I answered. She studied me for a second, something flickering behind her eyes, maybe curiosity, maybe a faint sense that something was not aligning the way it used to. But it passed quickly. It always did. Because doubt cannot survive long when confidence is that deeply rooted. She poured herself a drink and moved through the house like everything still belonged to her. And I let her. That was the final step. Not taking control in a way she could see, but letting her believe she still had it. Because the truth was, by then, the shift had already happened. She just had not realized it yet. The morning it happened did not feel dramatic. No storm, no raised voices, no final argument waiting to explode. Just silence. The kind that settles in before something irreversible takes place. Olivia was still asleep when I got up, the house wrapped in that early light that makes everything look softer than it really is. I moved through each room slowly, not hesitating, not second-guessing, just confirming what I had already decided days ago. The suitcase was already packed. Not rushed, not thrown together, but deliberate. Essentials only. The rest was no longer mine to carry. I walked into the study one last time and checked the folder, every document in place, every detail accounted for. Copies had been sent. Transfers had been scheduled. Ownership had already shifted in ways she could not see yet. That was the difference between leaving and exiting. One is emotional. The other is final. I paused by the kitchen counter, the same place she stood every night, glass of wine in hand, confident in a life she believed she controlled. My phone buzzed once. A message from Ethan. It is done. 2 words, nothing more. But they landed with weight. Quiet confirmation that everything we had set in motion had already crossed the point of no return. I did not leave a note. There was nothing left to explain. Explanations are for people who still think there is something to fix. I walked out the front door, closed it behind me, and for a moment, I just stood there, looking at a house that had stopped being mine long before this morning. Then I got in the car and drove away. No hesitation. No looking back. Because by the time Olivia woke up, by the time she reached for her phone, her accounts, her version of control, she would realize something she had never prepared for. I had not just left. I had already taken everything that mattered with me. Olivia woke up to silence, but not the kind she was used to. Not the quiet of an empty house waiting for her to fill it, but something heavier, something off. She reached for her phone first, like she always did, thumb moving automatically across the screen. That was when it started. Notifications that did not make sense. Access denied? Session expired. She frowned, tried again, slower this time, as if the system might correct itself if she gave it a second chance. It did not. She sat up, the sheet falling from her shoulder, the room suddenly unfamiliar in a way she could not explain. Her banking app opened, then froze, then refreshed to 0. Not low. Not reduced. 0. She stared at it, waiting for the numbers to come back like they had just slipped out of place. They did not. Downstairs, the house felt different. Subtle at first. Then obvious. Files missing. Access locked. The structure she thought she controlled no longer responding to her. She called my name once, sharp, certain I was somewhere in the house, that this was a mistake she could fix with a conversation. Silence answered her. She checked the doors, the rooms, the spaces where I used to exist. Nothing. Just absence. The kind that does not leave traces because it was planned that way. Panic does not arrive all at once. It builds in layers. Confusion first. Then realization. Then the moment everything connects and there is nowhere left to place the blame except the truth. By the time her phone rang, her hands were already shaking. A number she did not recognize. She answered anyway. Listened. Said nothing. Then slowly lowered the phone like it had just confirmed something she could not undo. Across town, I stood by a window that overlooked a city that no longer felt like it was closing in on me. It felt open. Quiet. Mine. I did not check my phone. I did not need to. I already knew how the story had ended. She believed I could not leave. She never understood that I already had long before I walked out the door.